Coming up today here on the Raiders Report, major Aaron Rodgers news that impacts the Las Vegas Raiders. And with that being said, I'm going to tell you there is only one way that the Las Vegas Raiders should even consider adding Aaron Rodgers. Also on top of that, Maxx Crosby was talking about AR-12 yesterday, Rodgers and his podcast. Does Crosby want Rodgers on his team? We'll talk about it here a little bit. And then I will illustrate and go through all of the ways that the Rodgers news impacts the Raiders. Because if you don't think it impacts the Raiders, I need you to wake up here a little bit. Also, if you haven't already, join the fam, man. Happy birthday to the Raiders Report. 7 years old today. There's been a lot of banging that has happened on this show. And A minor, you already know. You got to wait 11 more years. But I mean this from the bottom of my heart. I love doing this a lot. I hope that you see Chugs and I's commitment to excellence. We grind with all of y'all because we know that y'all deserve it. Raider Nation is undefeated. I love you guys to the moon and back. Please keep helping this show grow. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on those notifications. This offseason is going to be something very, very special. We got to give a huge shout out to our sponsor today, Panda Sups. They are sponsoring today's show. Reminder code FKC for 25% off at pandasups.com. So let's get in here to the latest around Aaron Rodgers. And today, February 13th, the Jets told Rodgers that they do not want him to be their Valentine, and they're going to be letting him go. According to Ian Rapoport, that the Jets are expected to use a post-June 1st cut on Rodgers. And if that sounds familiar, that's what the Raiders did last season with Jimmy Garoppolo, which essentially means this. If Rodgers wants to sign with a team, he's going to be able to sign with a team once the free agency period starts. But the money for the Jets isn't going to happen until after June 1st. With that being said, though, the Jets are eating $49 million by moving on from Rodgers. Because they are designating him as a post-June 1st cut, they're going to eat $14 million in 2025 and $35 million in 2026. So the question that I have been asked multiple times, because last offseason, I was one of the people that said the Raiders need to consider Russell Wilson. In fact, humbly, I was the very first person that said the Raiders need to consider signing Russell Wilson because he's going to sign at $1.2 million due to his contract with the Denver Broncos. So the question is, should the Raiders be interested in Aaron Rodgers? And to me, you got two options. The first option is this. You could trade for Rodgers, and if the Raiders still want to trade for him, I know that the Jets have already said that they're going to release him. They haven't released him yet. Hop into that time machine. Remember a few years ago when the Raiders said that they were going to release Gabe Jackson, they were going to release Rodney Hudson, and then a few hours later they were able to get a trade done. That technically can still happen here for Rodgers. But if you're the Raiders, and if you were to make a trade, the cap hit is 9.5. You would still take on $37.5 million in cash, but that's money that just, Mark Davis has got to pay. But you still could make the trade. And if the Raiders wanted to make a trade because the Jets already know that they're going to get rid of him, and if the Jets already know that they're going to get rid of him, I think a lot of people assume that you would be able to get Rodgers for the absolute cheapest price. And one of the things that somebody asked me today was, Mitch, so you're telling me you wouldn't want to trade for Aaron Rodgers for a 7th-round pick in 2026 if his salary cap hit for the Raiders was 9.5? The problem is you can't look at it like that because the Aaron Rodgers contract situation and the Russell Wilson contract situation is two totally different things. What do I mean? Here's what I mean. The Jets, to me, aren't going to trade Rodgers. The only way that the New York Jets are going to trade the Raiders Rodgers is if you give the Jets a legit pick. Like I'm talking a top caliber pick. Why is that? If the Jets trade Rodgers, they lose $25.5 million in cap space, and they eat $49 million in 2025. If the Jets just designate him post June 1st, which is what they are going to do, they save $9.5 million. So if the Raiders wanted to trade for him, they would need to make it worth it while for the Jets, right? Because you're not just going to eat all this money for a 7th-round pick in 2026. If you're going to make the trade, you got to make it worth it for the Jets. With that being said, I'm not trading for Aaron Rodgers. No way in hell. It doesn't make any sense, and the Jets aren't going to do it either. Which now brings us to option B, plan B. The Raiders sign Aaron Rodgers for the vet minimum at $1.2 million. I'm telling you this right now. The only way in hell I would ever consider Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback for the Las Vegas Raiders is if he signed that contract at $1.2 million like Russell Wilson did last season for the Pittsburgh Steelers. The problem is the contracts, again, are very different. So I reached out to an NFL insider that I am very close to about the contract situation with Wilson, about the contract situation with Aaron Rodgers, and this is what they told me. He gets nothing new. Wilson had not yet paid out money from the Broncos coming his way that would be canceled out by signing with a new team. Not the case with Aaron Rodgers. So I saw a few people out there wondering, all right, well, if Rodgers is going to get all this money, he's already gotten his $75 million guarantee by the Jets cutting him. Rodgers isn't going to get the remainder of that $37.5 million. He's not getting any of it. If Rodgers was going to get that $37.5 million, then sure, there would have been an opportunity for him to play at 1.2. But my point is this. If I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to call Aaron Rodgers a cancer, which y'all know how important that word is for me and my grandfather. I've had a lot of family members die from cancer. I want Rodgers to prove to the Raiders, to prove to me, to prove to you, to prove to the entire world that he's willing to put somebody else, that he's willing to put the Raiders, a team, in front of himself. And I think the only way possible that it proves it from the jump is if he signs a $1.2 million deal. And I know that that's unlikely. And I know all of these things. But realistically, Rodgers is going to say what he wants to say. And he's a smooth talker. He's going to step up to the podium. He's going to say it's all about the team. It's all about winning. It's all about the shield. But in the back of my mind, I'm just going to go, I don't really believe you, Aaron. The only way that I would believe the words Rodgers says is if his actions backed it up. The only way that you're going to believe it right away, $1.2 million vet deal. Then I will entertain the idea of bringing in Aaron Rodgers. If it's not for 1.2, I'm not interested. Here's your opportunity, though, to call the shots. Let's say we're sitting down with John Spytek, Tom Brady, Pete Carroll. Should the Raiders be interested in signing Aaron Rodgers? I want you to type S for sign, type P for pass. This is going to be the pinned comment here on today's show. Scroll on down, give me your answer. My answer coming up here in just a moment. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to say why the Raiders could sign Rodgers, and then I'm also going to give you the reason of why that they shouldn't sign Rodgers. Let's just play a game because that's what this show's about here of why would the Raiders even be interested in bringing in number 12? First, Brady won a Super Bowl with John Spytek when everybody thought he was washed. He threw for 24 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. His final year in New England, everybody said he was done. Then he goes down to Tampa Bay, gets a fresh new start, and guess what? Ends up winning the Super Bowl. You also got to remember, Mark Davis was interested in Aaron Rodgers in 2022. And if you don't think that that matters to Mark and that doesn't matter to Tom, you're lying to yourself. And if the Raiders think that Rodgers is truly the best free agent out there, I don't think Rodgers is the best free agent option. I'm not afraid to say it. But if they do, that could be a reason why they go out and they try to get him. When you look at his numbers the last 4 seasons, I mean, a 63.0% completion percentage is a little bit lower. A decent amount of yards, 28 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Like, those are some pretty solid numbers when you look at it from the surface level. But we're not going to get the 2021 version of Rodgers. We're not going to get the MVP caliber level of Aaron Rodgers. And when you look at his numbers from last season, amongst qualifying quarterbacks, he had the 30th highest completion percentage. He was 8th in the NFL in passing yards. He was tied for 7th in passing touchdowns. He had the 12th most interceptions with 11, but QBR was 48.0. I used to work for the Jets. A lot of y'all already know that. I got a lot of friends that still work at the Jets. My dad is a diehard Jets fan who watches every single game. Looking at the Aaron Rodgers numbers and then actually seeing the on-field performance, I don't think fully match up. Rodgers was not anywhere close to being as good as what his touchdown numbers look like, what his passing yards look like. I would actually say legitimately, and I've said this before, that I don't think Aaron Rodgers is a top 20 quarterback in the NFL. And that 25th overall QBR is probably where I would rank him, though Rodgers with Chip Kelly throwing the ball down the field, I don't know, man. I don't know. Here's why, though, I wouldn't sign Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers isn't interested in being a bridge. Every report that you've ever seen around Rodgers is he doesn't want to work with a younger quarterback and he doesn't want to teach a young QB. Here's the thing, Aaron. The only way that you're going to get an opportunity on the Las Vegas Raiders is if you are okay and open to the idea of when the Raiders draft a QB, you're going to have to teach them. You're going to have to be that bridge QB. If you're not interested in being a bridge, then I don't understand why the hell we're even doing what we're doing with Pete Carroll, giving him the type of contract that he did. The Raiders want to build a culture. Rodgers has been a cancer. But if you sign that $1.2 million deal, then maybe you can prove to me that you care more about something than just yourself. And then the last is this. If the Raiders just don't believe that he's the top option, I really, truly believe the only way the Raiders would bring in Rodgers is if they thought he was the number one free agent quarterback out there. And I'm sorry, I don't think that he is based on what I believe it could cost. $1.2 million Aaron Rodgers? That might be the best quarterback on the open market. Coming up next here on the show, does Maxx Crosby want Rodgers? And he had a very interesting quote about Rodgers yesterday on his podcast. And I thought, you know what, with all the news around Rodgers, I have to be able to sit up here and talk to you about what Max said, because what Max says is important. And then I'm also going to get into why this Rodgers news impacts the silver and black. Before I do, huge shout out to our sponsor, Panda Subs. Use code FKC. If you want to check out any of their products, you can try them out. I would say this, if you need extra motivation to work out, their pre-workout, and even for people out there that work out all the time, like I follow a few people on IG, like Cash Joey. That dude's absolutely yoked. Killer Cruising, absolutely yoked. These are people that I know work out all the time. When you work out a lot, sometimes your body just gets used to a pre-workout. Try Panda Subs pre-workout. I work out, I think, way more often than the normal person. I take a half a scoop of this stuff, and it wakes me up. Chugs in the background's like, yeah, all right, pal. My point is more, I have a lot of caffeine, and this is a great way to get my workout started. Also, the burn, it melts fat off you. If you need a multivitamin, it's there. They got all sorts of new products, pandasubs.com. And if anybody who is a Raiders fan and uses the FKC code, because I'm going to keep using that piece. I can't celebrate the Chiefs losing enough. You're also going to get a protein shaker, and you're going to get a bag if you spend over $100, and if you're in the United States, domestically is what he told me. Pandasubs.com, 25% off, code FKC. So does Maxx Crosby want Aaron Rodgers on the Raiders? He talked about this on February 12th, and he said, quote, I would get Rodgers, why not? And I don't want to do Max dirty, and that's not what I'm trying to do here, but I listen to Max's show. I listen to The Rush, and I enjoy listening to those guys when I'm taking Chuck on a walk or doing whatever. And one of the things Crosby always says, he's like, somebody's going to take a clip of what I say, and they're going to put it out there. And I've already seen this clip of Crosby being put out there because all he's talking about is Aaron Rodgers. And then there is a quote in there that says, I would get Rodgers, why not? The problem is, though, Crosby was talking about the Vikings. He's not talking about the Las Vegas Raiders. Here's what he had to say. Bro, send him to Minnesota. If they don't bring back Sam Darnold, I would get Rodgers. Why not? Imagine him with Kevin O'Connell, then Justin Jefferson, and Jordan Addison. Every quarterback that has played under O'Connell effing lights the shit up, from Kirk Cousins to Darnold, all those guys. Get Rodgers for a year or two. Then you have Rodgers versus the Lions again. That would be low-key lit. When I hear Crosby talk about that, you got to be interested in every time Max opens up his mouth about a quarterback, because Mark cares what he has to say, Tom Brady cares what he has to say, and I just think that the nation cares what he has to say. When I read that quote, though, I don't think, wow, Crosby wants Rodgers to be a Raider, because the way Crosby is, if he wanted Rodgers to be a Raider, he would have said he should have came to Las Vegas, right? Like, he would have recruited him to Las Vegas. He wouldn't have said, you should go play for Kevin O'Connell. You should go play for Minnesota. I learned that Crosby's got a lot of respect for O'Connell, and he does have a lot of respect for O'Connell. And a lot of people around the NFL do respect him, because not only is he from the Sean McVay tree, which is something that I've been begging the Raiders to try to get, but at the same time, I almost wonder by reading that quote if Max doesn't think Sam Darnold is as good as what maybe some other people in that Raiders organization do, because from what it sounded like, it was Kevin O'Connell made Kirk Cousins. Kevin O'Connell made Sam Darnold. Aaron Rodgers should go play with Kevin O'Connell to help him get his career jump-started again with all those players. That was my 2 cents on it because I saw so many people with that quote and so many people talking about what Max said. If Max wanted Aaron Rodgers to be a Raider, he would have said Aaron should come to the Raiders, not Aaron should have went to the Minnesota Vikings. That's just my opinion, though. Coming up last here on the show, why the Jets moving on from Rodgers does impact the Las Vegas Raiders. You have to know that it impacts this team. The first reason, and this is the very first thing that I thought of, was, all right, well, if the Jets are already telling Rodgers that they're moving on from him, does that mean we're going to get a yard sale? Does that mean we're going to get a fire sale? And they're just going to start shipping off players. Maybe they're willing to trade some guys because they know that now they need a franchise quarterback. Here was a tweet by Quinnen Williams, one of my favorite defensive tackles in the NFL, and he said this: another rebuild year for me, I guess. What's funny about this tweet is Quinnen Williams has since deleted it. Luckily for us, we were able to get the screenshot here at Chat Sports, and we saved it. Quinnen Williams is already thinking rebuild, and they told him to delete it. The fact that the Jets told him to delete it tells me that they didn't like that Quinnen said that. It also tells me that there are players inside of that Jets locker room that want to win right now, that made contracts to win right now, that were told many years ago they were going to win right now, are not very happy in this current situation. I think it also goes to show when you know that they're going to move on from Davante Adams. So for the New York Jets to move on from Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, they're going to get into a rebuild, which means for some of those players that are on those really big contracts, because the Jets spent a lot of money to make Rodgers happy. All I'm saying is keep an eye out for a lot of those Jets players because I think they could be doing a fire sale very soon. Next thing that you got to think about is the fact that the Jets need a quarterback. For the Raiders, we know we need a QB, whether that's free agency, whether that's in a trade, whether it's in the draft. This is another team in terms of competition that we have to deal with, whether that's outspending them or whether it's being able to draft a quarterback. I would say right now, these are the top 10 teams that are looking for a QB. And you can point and poke holes through certain teams here, but there's no doubt that 7 of these teams are going to be looking for a quarterback this upcoming season. Like the Jets, the Raiders, the Browns, the Steelers, the Titans, the Giants are all looking for quarterbacks. I know Kellen Moore said that he was excited to work with Derek Carr, but at the same time, what do you expect him to say at this point? Are they going to move on from D.C.? Are the Seahawks going to move on from Geno Smith? Are the Colts going to stick with Anthony Richardson? Are the Vikings going to stick with J.J. McCarthy? There is a lot of unknowns. But you know what I would say to any quarterback that believes in himself, even just a little bit? The Raiders are a great, and I mean this, a great quarterback destination. And if you don't believe me, go check out this video. If that statement that I just made out there made you roll your eyes, you're like, Mitch, dude, what are you on right now? Watch this video, and if you still don't think that the Raiders are a great quarterback destination, then I would say to the quarterback that doesn't think that this is true, you don't believe in yourself and you don't have confidence in yourself. That's how I would refrain. Let's go to the last thing here. The Jets, they got the number 7 overall pick. The Raiders are picking 6. The team that's right behind them is number 7. And one of the biggest talking points right now is, could Shedeur Sanders slide to the Raiders at 6? Could Cam Ward fall down a little bit? Is there going to be a team that trades up to go get a QB? You know my bold prediction right now? I think the New York Jets are the team that tries to figure out a way to move up and go get a guy. And I think Shedeur Sanders would be a quarterback that they would entertain. Let's face it, Woody Johnson cares about money. Woody Johnson cares about ticket prices. He cares about putting butts in seats. Shedeur Sanders would do that immediately. And New York, come on, Shedeur was made for New York. It would be a lot of pressure. And I'll tell you, I think it would be an absolute dumpster fire if Sanders ended up going to the Jets. But the fact that now we got another team picking in the top 10 that's looking for a quarterback, it's just extra competition, which is why it's even more important for the Raiders to lock in at least a starter during free agency, because you don't know what's going to happen in the draft. Quite frankly, the only quarterback that I would even trust to start right away in 2025, and I've said this for months, is Cam Ward. If it's not Cam Ward, you better have a starting quarterback in free agency because that QB is going to have to sit. So in conclusion here, the Jets are moving on from Aaron Rodgers, and it does impact the Raiders' free agency, trade-wise, and also in the draft. Trading for Rodgers is not an option now based off of what we would have to give up to go get him because of how much money the Jets would eat. The only way that I would even consider signing him right now is if he's willing to sign that vet minimum deal and prove to me, prove to the Raiders fans, prove to the Raiders players, prove to this organization that he's going to put the shield above himself, because there is no player above the shield, and that's what scares me the most about Aaron Rodgers.